and that we got that email. And I think that was maybe the last gig I did. If it wasn't the last one, it was pretty close. I got that email. I was like,
I quit.
Here. I was like, I'm done. Yeah, I was.
And this podcast is about the both of you and your journey in music. And we'll talk obviously about the new music and how you guys started Marian Hill and all that fun stuff.
Sounds great.
Cool. Well, let's start with you, Samantha. Where were you born and raised?
Philly.
Okay.
Yes.
Were you both born and raised in Philly?
We were.
Yeah, we met in middle school. Sorry.
Wow.
We met at middle school. So we grew up together.
Okay. Well, wow, that's awesome. That's really awesome.
We go way back.
Yeah. So Samantha, born in Philly, but how did you get into music? You guys obviously grew up in the same town if you're going to the same middle school, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you get into music?
Oh gosh, I was always singing. That was really my thing. It sounds cliche, but really as early as I can remember, I think I did a talent show in first grade. And my parents were like, "Oh, you can sing. So maybe you should take some other lessons and we should, cultivate this." And then I guess I really started taking it seriously in high school. I think is when I thought that I could really pursue music professionally, and kind of the same thing. Took lessons all throughout and started writing music, and Jeremy and I teamed up in college.
Okay.
Mostly after, but started writing a little bit together in college.
But you knew each other in middle school and through high school?
Yeah.
Were you friends, or you're just like, oh, I know you went to my school?
Yeah, we were friends. Yeah, we were in all the same activities. We were in choir together and musicals. So yeah, all the same musical activities, really.
Oh, that's awesome. And what about writing songs? You said you started writing songs, Samantha, in high school?
Yeah, they were terrible, but I did. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I started to explore my feelings.
Got it. And I see some guitars behind you.
I don't know why. That really makes it look like I play, but I don't.
Okay. Were you just were you writing on guitar at that age?
A little bit.
Okay.
But again, I knew like 4 chords. It was pretty poor.
That's all you need, right? What is it? 4 chords in the truth, 3 chords in the truth?
Yeah, exactly.
She's selling herself short. You can do a lot with a few chords. She can play much better guitar than probably the majority of people, I would say.
Well, that's awesome.
Well, that's very kind.
I mean, the majority of people can't play guitar, so I mean, it's
that's a great.
You don't want me in guitar players.
I did not say majority of guitar players. I said majority of people.
Yeah. Okay.
Majority of people. I like that. Did you guys play music? You said you're in the same classes, but did you play music when you started writing songs, Samantha? Were you guys teamed up at this point to work on music together or no?
No. We
I think in middle school and high school, it was mostly we would like talk about songwriting together because we were some of the only people we knew doing it. Mm-hmm. But I always feel like my experience was you have to like get comfortable enough songwriting on your own first to be able to really have a productive collaborative songwriting process with somebody where you're not doubting all your ideas. So I think for both of us, we were kind of like growing as songwriters in parallel for a while. And then when we'd kind of gotten it together, we were like, all right, let's try making some stuff together.
Yeah. And we had a mutual appreciation, and we're listening to not completely the same, but we had a lot of musical overlaps in terms of artists we listened to at the time. And so that was really nice to have someone to talk to about that.
For sure. And what about you, Jeremy? Were you born in Philly as well?
Yep, Philly suburbs. My dad was the choir director at Haverford and Bryn Mawr colleges for a long time. He just retired a few years ago. And so I grew up around there and grew up in a house where there was always music going on. I think when I was 4, I asked my parents to learn violin. And so I started violin lessons when I was 4.5.
Wow.
Piano when I was like 10. I think I was singing at some point. I think that was probably earlier, really, but that's less of a thing that is like tracked by private lessons in terms of like when you start. But I sang in choirs for pretty much all my life until I was like 22. And was playing piano, and I started writing music because my dad had Sibelius for his job, which is music notation software. and I would like play around on his computer with my friends, and I was like notating Dr. Dre beats. And I always joke that the first beat I ever made was in Sibelius, and it has like a terrible MIDI library, and it sounded absolutely atrocious. But that was the first way in which I was able to like use a computer to write music and make it, you know, happen.
Mm-hmm. What drew you to violin at 4? Do you remember?
Not really.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if you saw it on TV and you're like, oh, I need to get a violin.
I don't know. Yeah,
grandma played it or something.
I'd have to ask them. I don't think none of them played it. I certainly was exposed to it. I'm sure they had some types of like orchestra books or something where I like knew what the instruments were, and something attracted me to that one.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty impressive though, to be 4.5. I have a 5-year-old, and he's just learning. I put him on drums because he was smashing everything during COVID. And I'm like,
yeah.
Electric drum kid, here you go. And we finally were able to get him lessons now that we're here in Nashville. But he's really interested in piano too. So, and he's 5, and I'm like, oh, I tried to like go find a piano teacher for a 5-year-old, and nobody was really willing to do it, which is weird. But yeah, I found a drum teacher.
For some reason, violin often starts younger. I will say, as a parent of a violin player, it sounds like the sounds they are making will be horrible for probably at least a year, if not 2. There's some serious like sawing away going on, and it can, and also, I mean, just like the size of instrument they're playing on just can't sound that good even at its best, because it's like this teensy little violin.
Sure.
But they say, and I guess I found this to be true, they say that it's really good for your sense of pitch to learn at a young age an instrument without frets. So on a violin, like if you have to calibrate how in tune you are by just like minute movements of your finger, as opposed to like piano or guitar, where if your instrument's in tune, you're generally playing in tune, and it's more about like remembering chords and stuff. But I went on to sing quite a lot, and was always like, had like a really good innate sense of like, is this in tune or not? And I think I owe some of that to violin at a young age.
That's very interesting. I didn't think about that at all. Like having, because there's not a fret that you're exactly pushing down. Like, okay, if I put my finger here and here, it's gonna play this chord.
They start you sometimes with little stickers that you're supposed to try to hit, but like it's you have to be a lot more precise. And you're really like thinking about, is this the right exact pitch, instead of like, is this the right key?
Sure. Wow. And you guys were both writing songs like parallel, you said. And when did you ever show each other, or were you playing open mic nights together?
I think by the end of high school, we'd played some open mic nights together. I taught myself guitar late in high school because my mom had one, and I just like picked it up and tried to learn some from lead sheets. So that I could write songs, and was kind of doing that on guitar and piano. I loved Ben Folds a lot in high school. So that was a big, got me like, oh, well, I'm not that good at guitar, but I can play piano. Let me see what I can do here.
Sure.
But yeah, like Sam, none of the stuff I made in high school was stuff that I proudly share now, but it was very important.
Do you have it somewhere, like on a CD or anything?
Yeah, I mean, in my last year in high school, I had like saved up money from singing in church choirs to buy a little production rig, and I had a Mbox 2 and Pro Tools and Reason 3.5.
Wow.
And made a little album that I put up on iTunes. That was pretty cute and silly, and just like me and guitar and piano for the most part, and like multi-tracking my vocals. But it's nowhere to be found now, but I have it. And I did like a choral piece at that time, and I had a little band that did some songs, and all of them were great learning experiences.
For sure. What about you, Samantha? Do you have any of those old songs recorded anywhere?
Unfortunately, yeah. I actually remember, like, because before Marian Hill happened, I was pursuing my own little solo project, and they were up on iTunes, and I actively took them down. I tried to bury any trace of those, but yeah, if you look hard enough, they're probably around.
You got to do some digging, you can find them.
Yeah. I have them.
You both went to, I mean, obviously you're both extremely smart. Yale and NYU, like, tell me about that. Did you go for some music?
Yeah, I'll start, I guess. I went to NYU. I went for music business. which
Okay.
really is, I mean, to each their own. But personally, I think music business is really only something you can learn by being in the field and actually doing it and living your life. I just didn't, and I kind of kicked myself actually because I wish I'd studied more music. I hated music theory. I hated studying it, and I really wanted it to always remain a passion.
Mm-hmm.
I never wanted to sort of, I never wanted it to feel like a chore. So I studied music business. That was my backup plan.
Yeah. Well, I
But,
think music business, that makes sense that it's constantly evolving, right? I mean, it's the
yeah.
whole industry has even changed over the past 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny. I was actually cleaning out because I'm in my family's house, and I was like cleaning out a lot of things, and I found my old music business textbooks. And my dad was like, well, why would you throw this away? And I was like, Dad, these have been outdated for like 10 years. I was like,
Right.
literally, like none of this is relevant anymore. So
That's great. Yeah, it's like
yeah,
why
it's
would it's
crazy.
like having CDs. Like, why would you keep these? You could just your
Yeah.
phone can hold every record or CD you probably ever owned.
Right.
That's
So
that's
yeah.
interesting how
Yeah.
quickly it does evolve, and with that, it's
Yeah.
very, very interesting. And
Yeah.
then you, Jeremy, you went to Yale. Did I read that correctly?
Yes. And I studied theater there because it was a much friendlier major than music. The music major at Yale is still like very old school, and you had to take like all these prereqs and like all this like music history that was pretty much all Western music. And I realized that I could do the theater major and take all the music classes I would want to take. And so that's pretty much what I did. I took they had a great musical theater songwriting program there, which I loved, which the best thing about it was that it was like a song a week type of class. There'd be like 5 or 6 other students in the class, and every week you'd come in with something, you'd share it with everybody, you'd get feedback, and then you'd do it again the next week. And I think that got me in a really good rhythm, and I kind of got addicted to finishing stuff, which has served me for the rest of my career. I just love getting a song done so that I can show it to people.
Sure.
And yeah, near the end, like my senior project was writing a musical, and for a while there, like writing musical theater was the path I was doing because it was the path that was most accessible there and that I was able to like find some traction in. I always say with Yale, like I came into Yale being like thinking I was a very good actor, singer, composer, and writer. And when you get there, you realize there are people better than you at pretty much everything. And so it becomes this like 4-year thing of like, all right, well, like what about me is special? Like what about me can still stand out amongst these like taller trees? And writing music was it. I really was able to like dig into that and realize that that was a place where I could still distinguish myself. There's great funding for doing your own shows there. So I was able to put up like 2 musicals that I wrote myself. And that was like a really valuable experience in like writing a thing, finishing a thing, making it happen with a team of people. And then near the end of my time there, I took a gap year where I was in the Whiff and Poofs, which are an a cappella group at Yale that's all senior, and we tour the world. So most of them take the year off to come back
Oh,
and
wow.
do classes the following year. But during that, I was like, man, how am I going to keep writing music? Like it won't be the same. So I decided I'd been kind of producing in Reason for fun when I had free moments over those years. And that became a lot more of I got like a tiny little keyboard. And every time I was on a long flight or a long bus ride or just wherever I was traveling, I would be making beats. And I really pushed myself to get better at production during that year. And the following year, it was hype machine time. So many new artists were breaking. I was following it like crazy. And I decided, I was about to graduate. Let me try making some music with my friends and submitting it to blogs on there that I like. And I put together a big list and wrote all these personal emails and did a song with Sam, who was the best singer I knew at the time, and a song with my friend at college. Put them both out about a month apart, and the one with Sam really took off. And then summer after graduation, we were writing more songs and figuring out a live show, and kind of took off from there.
Wow. So were you guys staying in contact throughout your college career? And Or was it like, hey, I know Sam is good. I'm going to call her up and see if she's willing to sing on this song?
We would, over like spring break, Thanksgiving break, generally when we'd catch up, it would be like showing each other stuff we're working on or trying to write together.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was getting more into producing, we were doing more of like writing to those. And Whisky, we kind of just stumbled into. It was a beat that I didn't think of to play for Sam, but just had. And she started singing something over it. And I think both realized it was something really unique.
Mm-hmm. And so you put that up on High Machine and it just started to go off kind of?
Yeah. I targeted a bunch of blogs that had posted music like ours. And at the time, there were literally hundreds of blogs that if like any 3 or 4 of them posted about you, you could start getting some real traction and people would start paying attention. And we were really lucky in that people did. And within a few days, one of the blogs I'd emailed was WXPN's blog, which is a alt radio station in Philly.
Mm-hmm.
And they were playing our song Whisky on the radio.
Wow.
And then we were getting emails from managers and publishers, booking agents and labels, all asking for more songs. And at the time we had like half of another song. So we really had to get to writing. But it was a really cool time because the whole industry was just watching all of those independent blogs, and you could really, if you took the time to research and targeted people who you thought would appreciate what you were doing, it felt like you could have a real shot.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What was it like to have your guys' song on the radio right away? I mean, maybe not right away, but to get it on your like a hometown station.
Yeah, it was awesome. I remember I was catering at the time and we got that email. And I think that was maybe the last gig I did. If it wasn't the last one, it was pretty close. I got that email and I was like,
I quit.
Yeah. I was like, I'm done. Yeah, it was pretty exciting. And I always I like to tell this because I think it's funny, and I'm glad that Jeremy pushed through, because I actually didn't even want to release Whisky. I was like,
really?
Yeah, I really loved it, but I just didn't really know what it was. I was overthinking it, and I was like, Jeremy, like, you're not going to release it. Like, who's going to listen to this? And he's like, no, I think it's great. I think we should. And I put up, I think I sat on it for a couple of weeks. I was like, well, I'm going to tune some vocals. I'm like, let's just polish it up. And Jeremy's like, okay. And 3 weeks went by and I did nothing. And he's like, I'm going to email some blogs now. And I'm like, all right, well, worst case scenario, they hate it. And
right.
Writes about it, I guess. So I'm glad that he was convinced otherwise.
Sure. So once that happens and you start getting, managers calling you and all these eyes are on you, is that overwhelming? Like, are you thinking, how are we going to continue doing this? Or did you already have songs ready to go, knowing like, oh, we've got this?
Yeah.
We definitely had to hunker down and write a lot.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I don't know if it was overwhelming. I would say, speaking personally, I think it was more exciting than overwhelming, but it definitely changed things because we didn't necessarily do this to start out. We didn't want to become a band necessarily. This was like a fun project. And all of a sudden, I think we were looking at it very differently. And I think
we were lucky enough to be able to be in a position where we could be like, well, this feels cool. Let's see if people like it. And if there's enough demand for it, then we can really do the hard part of like committing to it and making lots of music and figuring out the band and really making it a full thing. But it was really nice to be able to have the luxury of trying it first and knowing that it would be well received. Like, we were able to be like, people want us to play shows. People want to hear more songs from us. They're like, we just have to write them. And I think there's some pressure with that, but I think at the time it was mostly exciting, and at a time when we were both like recently out of college, and there's lots of like, what am I doing with my life? I'm like, is this the right path? Like, am I making enough money? Like, how should I set myself up for success? It helped a lot in making those decisions. Like, I think it would have been a lot harder if we were just like, we got to start grinding and like doing shows and putting out an album, and we don't know if people will care. Like, we were able to know that like when we do shows, people will care before we had done any of that.
Yeah, it was such a unique time in the industry too, I think, to be able to launch like that.
Sure. And at that point, when you were submitting the song to the blog, was it like, were you going by Marian Hill at the time, or was it like, here's a song for? Okay, so you kind of had the
also like we threw the name together. You know,
Yeah.
we were like, we need something to put on this. Let's put together our character names from a musical we were in middle school.
Something that
Marian Hill sounds kind of cool. I always think it's so silly. It came from names, but I thought Marian Hill sounded like some kind of like location or something, and just a vibe.
That's what I thought.
Thank you. So many.
I thought it was like your middle school or something.
Yeah. So many people just think it's like they'll be like, "Oh my God, Marian," and it's funny. I can't even get mad at it anymore because I'm like, whatever. If you're a fan, you're a fan. But
yeah.
But to come back to your question that started it, we made that name and sent it out with the music, and it was all kind of a test balloon. Like, let's see. And then it became like, I think like definitely a few years later, we were like, like Marian Hill is our whole professional identity. Like, will you look at that?
It's really wild. Yeah, but it's definitely overwhelming, I guess, in the sense that we very quickly started to get a lot of questions and emails and offers, and just we realized that we very quickly had to build our team and figure out, you know, what that was going to look like, and you know, what sort of like
music
next 6 months look like.
Musically, we were writing a lot, but like we were, you know, it was a year in which we didn't have the full luxury of just writing a lot. Like Sam was living at home, I was living in New York and like doing various on the side jobs to like scrape by, and like taking boat buses home to write with Sam. And we definitely also musically, it was a really interesting process of, I'm so grateful to Whisky because we like stumbled into that song and it was such a good blueprint for the music we wanted to make. And I always say too, for me as a producer, it was the best thing I'd ever made by a significant margin. And I had kind of just stumbled into that by accident, and I had to like hold myself to that standard afterwards. And that helped me really level up. But I think we had a few in the writing immediately after that really worked, like Love It and One Time. But we also got to a point where, because it was so new and we were so thinking like, we've got to write it so it sounds like Marian Hill, we got to a point where like everything was sounding a little too similar. And I think we had this big crystallizing moment when we had then, I think we were probably at least 6 months into writing together regularly as our first priority thing, that we were able to kind of have this breakthrough and realize, when we started, it was an accident that we stumbled into. We didn't really know how to do it, and we wanted to make sure we replicated it in the 6 months after that. But once we'd been writing together for that long and started developing a flow and like a taste together and what we liked, we could kind of let go of it and like needing to be the sound, and trust that if we were making it together, that it would sound like Marian Hill. And that's when Got It and Deep were written. And I think both really unlocked a lot of things for us. And because I was using like the same instruments and drum sounds on everything, and we were writing like the same kind of melodies. And I think both of those songs really felt explosive and different. And it opened up a lot of things for us. And since then, I think we've been able to have a lot more freedom, just making stuff that both of us love and waiting until it's done to look at a bunch of songs and be like, maybe this one doesn't quite feel like us, but not letting that voice get into the writing process too much.
Yeah, I could see that happening. I mean, you're like, well, it worked. So do we just keep kind of following this sound that we created on the one song that did really well? I think also people with TikTok and stuff, somebody gets a viral hit off TikTok, I would imagine it'd be hard not to be like, okay, I need to do this because that resonated with a bunch of people, like to try to almost like go back and replicate what you had done.
It's a real balance, finding like ways to continue the spirit of the thing that people really connected with, while not just remaking the same thing, because it just dilutes every time the more people get used to it.
And you put out, was Play the first EP you did?
Yes.
Okay. And that signed you, did you sign to Republic on that first EP?
Pretty
Yeah.
well, we did that first EP. The biggest thing that happened with that first EP was a Vine. Thank the Vine gods.
Oh,
of the
really?
time.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of, I always joke that a bunch of young teens in 2014 discovered that Leonardo DiCaprio used to be like very dreamy to our music. It was just this like quick like fan cam Vine of Leonardo DiCaprio in Titanic, and I think a bunch of people were like, "Oh my god," because he was already kind of
You're like 90s Leo.
Yeah,
right.
But
Wow.
that gave us our first like serious iTunes check, and we took our parents out to dinner. And soon after that, we did the singles "Got It" and "Lips" with Psy, which was a blog that had written about us a lot. And those got It, I remember, got picked up on on Today's Top Hits on Spotify in like 2014, when it was all incredibly new, and we were like, oh, what is this Spotify thing? I guess this is cool. And it was really off the momentum of that and the one-time Vine that we were able to sign in early 2015. And then we put out the Sway EP because they were like, we want to put out something right away now that you're signed so we can really push it. And it's so funny because the Sway EP has become, and even now I feel this way, it's like one of our best works and this very like classic body of work that our fans love. And it very much was, they were like, all right, we got to put something out. What do you guys got? And we were like, well, we'll take the best stuff off Play, and then we'll add some new songs that are our favorites that we've written recently, and just put it all together and throw it out there. And it was very rushed and not very calculated, and it's really stood the test of time.
Wow. I mean, that's funny because Hype Machine was essentially, if you made it on Hype Machine that at the time, or number one on Hype Machine, it was like, that's making New Music Friday on Spotify now. Or but it happens so much more organically. So much now is, even TikTok is algorithmic. You're just like, I hope the algorithm likes us. And there was something really cool back then about being like, all right, there's like 100 people that can do this for us, and we just need like 3 to 10 of them. Let's care. Let's see if we can get them interested. It's almost like
a different way.
Submitting your song like demos and tapes to record labels. I don't feel like that's even a thing, right? If I was an A&R for a record label, I would just go, okay, this artist has.
They're all just on TikTok now.
Yeah, you're on TikTok, and then you go over their Instagram, and then you're like, okay, they have this following, they've built a brand for themselves. I'm going to invest in something that's already working. Why am I going to take a chance on something that's not?
Yeah, now that there's numbers for everything. It used to be, I feel like there were numbers for sales, but those were like industry news. Like we would kind of know like how many sales like Nelly and Eminem had, but like you only really cared about those types of numbers if they were already huge. And now it's like everybody on every stage, everybody can see, all right, what's the follower count? What's the monthly listeners? Like, I don't know if you have enough. Like it's very, you think you know everything already, so there's far less incentive to like trust your gut and your taste on something when you can just always go for the sure things. Right. Yeah, it's so different, especially with TikTok. I mean, that's like a focus group in itself. You can put a song on there and be like, does anyone care? Well, let's see. Totally. That's so crazy. That's so cool to get that. I mean, I feel like there's more validation there for your project if these high ups at Hype Machine were like, oh, this is cool. Like if we think this is cool, other people will probably think it's cool as well. And that's usually what happened on that. Yeah. Well, it became this metric for people to be like, what's like happening like in the underground of music? Like what are people excited about? And then you had proof, if it was charting on Hype Machine, that was the case. Yeah. It was really funny too, because I remember Jeremy had done his first remix, and I think that went to number 1 on Hype Machine before one of our songs did. Yeah. I think Whisky peaked at like 7, I think, and I forget how high Love It got. Yeah. And I was very upset. I was like, this is unacceptable. And then thank God, I think Got It Yeah.
I got it or Lips, maybe Got It because it's released first, was the first song of ours to reach #1. I was like, yes.
That's so cool.
Do it. Yeah.
Well, when you sign a major label deal like Republic, I mean, especially for you, Jeremy, coming from a musical household where your dad was this, he was part of the church, right? Is that what you said, church choir? Or?
He's doing a church choir now, but at the time he was doing Haverford and Bryn Mawr colleges. He directed the choral program there, and also like taught classes and stuff.
But to see his son go and make it in the industry is like signing a major record deal. That must have been big for the both of you.
Yeah, I think it was. It's a funny thing because it's very much the side of music that he had never even touched. Like he is very steeped in classical music. He's got all these scores. He's conducted orchestras and choirs his whole life, and knows everything happening in that world. And musical theater was a little more adjacent, but pop music and Republic Records was very, like, I think, new for him too. And it's been kind of fun for us to both kind of have our areas of music, and we come together and talk about it.
That's so cool. And for you, Samantha, you had a degree in music business. Was that, you could probably utilize it at that point, right? I mean, you're still fresh, or the knowledge was fresh.
Yeah, I would say in the very early days, like I could certainly navigate certain things. I had the general knowledge of what we were looking at and sort of how the process should go. So yeah, I would say I probably don't lean on it anymore, but certainly starting out in 2013, 2014, it was helpful to have.
She definitely taught me what publishing and master was, and how this whole arcane system of music ownership and monetization that we have works.
Well, that's great. That'd be great information to have, because a lot of artists lost everything coming up, right? They would sign deals and lose all the rights, and there's a bunch of even bands that were signed to indie labels that were getting screwed when it comes to that.
I was probably overly cautious. I remember actually sitting in an early meeting with Republic, and one of the A&Rs, we were sitting in a room together, and I was like, don't shelve us. I was like, I'm pretty, and he was like, that doesn't happen. I was like, I don't know, I've heard horror stories.
Like,
Yeah, I was like, I think it does. Don't lie to me.
Right.
I don't want to sign if you're not, gonna believe in us and get behind the project. So and it was fine, but yeah.
That's funny. And you made with one time you made it back on to alternative radio, didn't you? Was that the next song that made it onto the radio?
Yes, I think so, because that was the big one that they were pushing.
One time?
Yeah, one time.
Oh yeah, that's the one that I didn't hear.
Yeah, one time.
Yeah.
I'm from the radio world, and I was working I might have been in San Diego at the time. I remember playing Marian Hill on your record on the air.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. That was definitely,
that's so cool.
Part of I think every artist who's been signed can relate to the honeymoon phase. But like when you first get signed, there's this kind of like, let's all do this, and the whole label is really galvanized. And I think it helped that there was already momentum around One Time from that Vine, but the radio team immediately got excited about pushing us at alt radio. And that was a really fun, it led to a lot of great shows. Like, we're able to play in cities that we never thought would matter, but like Kansas City, the Buzz there always played us a lot. And now we have like a built-in crowd of like diehard Marian Hill fans in Kansas City just because of that. And some really cool things have come from like the alt radio communities that supported us. There's a lot more willingness to take a chance on new stuff on alt radio, it seems, than a lot of
I think
formats.
Kansas City, that station in Kansas City, is like one that is a real tastemaker station where they will play stuff. Once you get into the station San Diego worked for was independent, but I used to work for a alternative station in San Francisco, and they were owned by CBS, and it was a lot more like, we're not going to add a record unless we know it's doing things elsewhere. And
totally.
I know Kansas City, that station is one, their program director is very hip on just, I'm going to try. I don't care. We'll see what it does. If it doesn't work, then we'll pull it. But if it, You know, they can break so many more bands taking that approach.
And I think they relish having that opportunity. I know when we were there, everybody was talking about how Glass Animals they'd been playing before anybody else.
Yeah.
But they really enjoy that and wear it as a badge of honor. And I think it makes sense with Kansas City. They're a city that a lot of people kind of write off and don't think about, but they have a lot of pride in like having their own culture and being ahead of things.
Yeah, when I got to the music programming side of the industry at the station I was at, I didn't realize that. I'm like, wow, like this station can't like my program director at the time was always like following that station. I'm like, that's like such a like a smaller market than San Diego and way smaller than San Francisco. Like, why are you watching this? And he's like, because this guy takes chances. Yeah. If it's working, then we'll follow suit. And then we ended up playing Down also. I remember that as well.
Thanks.
But that song you got a platinum record from that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. That's huge.
Well, so to start the Down story, I always will remember we were taking an Uber home from the studio when we were writing Act 1, and the driver asked if he could hear our stuff, and we played him One Time and Down. We were like, we'll show you like one song that's out that the people seem to like, and then we can play you something that we just like made last week. And he liked One Time fine, but was very like, what was that other one? Can I listen to that other one again? And we were like, sorry, it's not out yet. you'll have to stay tuned. But it definitely, I remember just like it having that kind of effect early on of just people being like, wait, what was that? I need to, we had a feeling it was special, and we started our album with it. And we actually I had a big fight with the label because I wanted to put this song, I Want You, at the end of our album. And because I thought it fit really well narratively there. And they were like, we've got to put the singles up at the top because it'll stream better. I held my ground. It was a big sticking point. And then Down was the first single. It did something, but it didn't do a ton. And then like a whole full year later, this Apple commercial thing happened and everything blew up. And now it is by far the biggest song on Act 1. And it's the first track. So it all worked out.
That's so cool. That is so cool. And at this point, like when you're getting the radio play and you're, platinum records, and doing the radio thing, are you getting put on big tours? Are you, especially with the Republic, are they putting on you with their artists and kind of having you open for them? Or like, how did the live aspect start?
I actually don't think Republic was too involved in touring.
Okay.
That was mostly, that came through our booking agents. We were with Paradigm at the time. We've since CAA, but
yeah, they're huge.
Yeah. But we're with, and everyone, there's, everyone sort of shuffled around. But yeah, we definitely did. I mean, Republic put us in rooms with a lot of pop radio stations, and we played showcases and things like that. But the touring front was mostly handled through booking, I would say.
I think we were really fortunate. Our manager came from a booking agency background. So we were like building the touring thing on that side of things already, but even before we signed. And when we signed, we were playing more of these alt radio shows and things, but we made a point of trying to do our own headlines on our own terms, and we were able to scale that up gradually in a way so that when Down was happening, we were doing our biggest headline tour to date, and we had a tour bus. And we've done a few opening gigs over the years. We opened for Alt J for like a few weeks of their US tour.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
it was really cool. Those guys are great. They were so nice to us, and we all hung out at the end. But by and large, we've done a lot. We spent a lot less time opening than a lot of acts have, and I think we're really lucky.
Yeah, that's really cool.
We played a lot of festivals, which is closer to opening, and that you're playing for a crowd of people that didn't necessarily buy tickets just to see you, and you're winning over some new people. And we love that. But the touring that isn't festivals for us, the vast majority has been headlines, and we're really lucky for that.
Yeah, we were never a band it's funny because we were on the road a lot and we were constantly traveling. But if there were bands, I remember one of the first times we sort of talked to Glass Animals. I think they had said they'd been on the road for a year. and hadn't been
Two
home.
or three.
Wow.
It might have been, yeah. And we were lucky that we always sort of got to take a break and come home for a minute and then go back on the road, because we mostly stuck to festivals, radio shows, and our own headlining tour.
Mhm.
And so we stayed in control of that schedule for the most part. We were like 6 weeks max, breaks in between. Like, let's do the shows that are important, but let's not run ourselves dry.
Right.
Although
Smart
we're still pretty
idea.
crazy, so it's hard to imagine. Like at the peak, we were gone a lot, so it's hard to imagine, not going home in over a year. But yeah,
Wow.
it's wild.
And in the next record, where you put an EP out again with Republic, with Unusual, what would you say like the big highlight takeaway from that record would be?
I think, we were able to do another tour of a similar scale. Touring with a tour bus is one of my favorite things. It's really, really nice. This being able to wake up in a new city and find somewhere to get lunch and go on a hike or a walk and get ready for a show in a really relaxed way is really great. And I love seeing the country that way.
Mhm.
We also got to work with Boy Wonder on the song Differently on that album, and he's one of my idols. So that was really special, just to get to meet him and hang out with him and learn from the way he works, which is definitely so many things I carry with me still.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think we'd also had our hit with Down, so there is pressure to follow that up, but we actually, I feel like, did a decent job in trying to keep our heads down and write this album without too many expectations, and seeing where the music took us.
Mm-hmm. And you just kept progressing, and you guys have just been doing that throughout your entire career.
Thanks.
It's quite amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, the record you put out, the EP you put out last year, or no, it's 2 years ago now, I guess. And March
put it
18th.
out. Yeah,
Who even
March
knows anymore?
March 2020 is when we
Not
put
even
that
know.
out.
Right. So tell me about that. So you get this, you have this record, you're going to self-release it. It's probably a lot of big plans in the works. And then you put the record out and it pretty much
destroyed
the same day, or, maybe a couple days later, everything.
I think it might have been like,
I always remember we had planned this, we were doing this cool concert at YouTube Space in New York, where I think we had some type of raffle for fans to come for free, and then it was going to be live streamed, and we'd done a rehearsal, and we're working with the team at YouTube, and we curated, they were like, what food do you want to have? And we can do a specialty cocktail. We were like, oh my God, this sounds so cool. We coordinated it all. And I remember the day after the dress rehearsal, Google was just yeah, we're shutting down all in-person Google events worldwide, pretty much. And they were ahead of everybody else. This is still, I remember thinking oh, that's annoying. They're being so overcautious. I guess we're gonna have to hunker down for a month, but then we'll get to do it again or whatever. And obviously that never happened. But I think that gave us a kind of is this thing more serious? Because I know that now we know that the tech people were sorry, we just got a text about something. The tech industry companies were ahead of things in terms of how seriously they were taking it. And now if you want to know what's really happening, be well, what's Google telling their employees? And it's yeah, they're never working in person again. And you're oh, okay.
Yeah. It was hard though. It was a weird time because 2019 was a light year. 2020 was really supposed to be the year that we did a little tour in support of this EP, just to sort of get back on the road and then release our album and, sort of get back to the grind and promotion. And we obviously, along with everyone, really had to recalibrate. And now it's been 2 years, really 3 years since we've done, a longer tour and have been able to promote our music the way that we had been used to. Jeremy and I aren't big on TikTok. We're not we'll do the necessary work, but we're certainly not a social media band per se. I don't think that's where our comfort levels lie in terms of
Mhm.
music promotion. I think we're I'll speak for myself trying to get better at it, but it was definitely hard. We had to really take a second and, look towards the future. Into
Sure.
2022.
Right. Well,
Uh,
over the course of the quarantine, was that were you working on this new record throughout
yeah.
that time? And what
Yeah.
was that like? You have some great, features and stuff on the album. Were those things that you were able to do in person, or like how did the record, go?
Yeah.
A ton of it was finished remotely. I think
Okay.
we before the pandemic had been writing a lot, so there was like a pretty big vault of songs that we could kind of pull from. But we definitely went from a place of being like stressed out about how the EP was going to go to being much more in a place of like working on this album is like the only good thing in our lives.
Right.
And
It was dark.
I think it motivated it motivated us to really take it, really appreciate it in a new way. I think it's easy when you're a band for a while to take for granted that you're going to be able to do it, and then when you can't do anything, it really brings things into focus of what's important. I also, at the start of the pandemic, had this weird thing where through home workouts and video games and working a lot, my hands started hurting, and I've had chronic pain in my hands where I was unable to make music for like 4 months, and then when I could again, it was like painful and slow. And I actually just had surgery last week
Oh my
on my
gosh.
wrist, which is supposed to fix everything, and I'm feeling very good about that. But it was a really dark time, and the music we were making once I was able to come out of that was just like hugely valuable in terms of just like bringing joy into my life again.
Mhm.
We wrote a bunch of new stuff, some new songs that are really special. OMG, which is my favorite single that we've put out so far from the album. And the I just need to turn my phone over. Sorry.
It's all good.
Yeah, no, but I would agree with you. I think, it was a hard time. It was really dark, because I'm sure every artist struggled.
Yeah. And that
And
takes to
Jeremy
another. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and we had actually never written music away from each other. We'd always made music in the same room.
Oh.
So, there were conversations about like, will you travel? Are you comfortable?
Mhm.
And so I never really left Philly, and he never left New York. So we just made it remotely for the most part. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 songs that we had written in 2019 that made the album.
Okay.
But for the most part,
Wow, everything was done remotely.
yeah.
Is that something that you would continue doing, or do you prefer doing it in person?
I think it's always better to make it in person, but I
Okay.
think we found, and we were lucky that we had such a shorthand leading up to this, so we were comfortable and familiar with the way that we work, of course. But
Mhm.
we have still worked remotely for some of it, but for the most part, I try to get up to New York, or, yeah, he doesn't come here.
He's like, I ain't going back home.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I have to get out of here. I have to live my life again, but
Sure. Wow. Well, Jeremy, I can imagine that being, not only are you in COVID and caught up inside, but having your livelihood, or basically your career, on the line as far as your hand going. Like, I'm glad that you're able to get the surgery, and that's going to make it better. But man, I can't imagine
thanks.
that.
It was a really scary time, and I really as if I didn't know, but it really put into focus how important making music is for me. Like when I couldn't do that, it was just so quickly, I was very depressed, because so much of like what I get up every day thinking about was gone. So certainly won't take that for granted again. And I've learned a lot during this year, and I think we made some of our best music too, having this new perspective. And there's some really special records on the album that make both of us pretty emotional, and I'm really proud of.
I love it. I love what you guys have put out so far. The newest one, Little Bit. You want to tell me a little bit about that song real quick?
Yeah, I was really, so at the earlier on in the pandemic, we had written enough songs that we were like, let's see what we're working with. And we've been trying really hard to push ourselves out of our comfort zone. So there were some songs that we felt like were us, like nailing the Marian Hill thing, and others that were a lot more like, well, what if we did this? This doesn't feel like the type of thing we usually do, but people want something new from us. So let's see. And I love to do this thing where I put together a playlist of, I think this was like 30 songs probably, send them to various friends, contacts we have in radio, A&Rs we like and trust, other artists we know in the music industry, and ask them to pick their favorites and tell us what they think. And then I tabulate their votes on a spreadsheet and kind of see what we're looking at. And Little Bit was one that I think surprised both of us in how many people liked it, because it felt very different for us. But it was like one of the top 4 or 5 songs out of all of those. And our new label, Photo Finish, loved it. And we were like, all right, sounds like we're taking this one seriously. Cool. And yeah, then the GASHI thing came through our label kind of later in the process. They were really helpful in helping us facilitate and find some really cool features, like Baby Tate on Ooh, That's My Type, which was so exciting. We've been following her for so long. And GASHI,
I think he's doing like the album stuff. Actually, we have deadlines.
Oh, sorry. I only have one more question after this.
No,
it's
curious. Fine. No, it's
okay.
fine. No, GASHI was incredible, and he brought so much. And I don't think we'd ever had. Oh, we did work with Big Sean. He did a remix of Down, but it was really refreshing to get his take.
Mm-hmm.
And we feel like he added so much to the record that I know I didn't anticipate. You know, we heard a little bit. We're like, yeah, it's great, and they were like, well, what about having a feature? And he can't imagine anyone else on it. He's been great to work with, and he's so talented.
That is
so we're
so
lucky.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That is amazing. And I appreciate you both doing this. I know
oh my
you're
gosh,
busy
of course.
people, and thank you so much again. One more quick question for you both. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Oh, that's a great question.
I mean, the ways to do it are different all the time. So I will get away from that in terms of like, put your music here, submit to these people. I mean, right now it's TikTok. Who knows what it'll be next year. But something I always hold on to is, I think this actually comes from Sondheim, funnily enough, rest in peace. But he said something along the lines of, if you want to really stand out and have a career making music, you've got to either be able to do the style that everybody else is doing better than anyone else, or something that no one else can do because it's so uniquely you. And I really like to encourage new artists to go for the second option there. I really think that's how we made our thing, is that nobody else sounded like Marian Hill. People hear it and they're like, what is this? And they want to check it out. And I've always thought that is a better and more sustainable path than trying to write a Katy Perry. Well, I guess that's not really relevant anymore.
Which is weird, right?
trying to write a Kid Laroi or Post Malone song and do it better than those guys can.
Well, in our age,
when they're backed by the whole industry, you can try to do it, and artists do break through that way. But it is, I always think, much harder and less fulfilling than trying to figure out a way to make something that sounds different from anything else that makes people turn their heads.
I love that.
Yeah.
How about you, Samantha?
Yeah, I would just say trust your voice. I think there's a fine line between, I think it's important to surround yourself with people that you trust. And I do think it's important to listen to advice. But at the end of the day, it's your career and no one understands your vision like you. And certainly held on to that throughout the last 8 years, but wish I'd listened to it even more. And yeah, trust yourself.